I stood in front of my childhood home watching orange flames consume everything, while my sister Jenna screamed at arriving firefighters that it was an electrical accident. Police cars pulled up with sirens wailing, and Detective Rodriguez approached with an arrest warrant clutched in his weathered hands. I held my phone displaying security footage of Jenna pouring gasoline around my front porch 30 minutes earlier. My parents rushed toward Jenna, not me, begging the detective to consider her 3-year-old daughter Madison, who desperately needed her mommy. The betrayal cut deeper than watching my house burn. 6 months ago, I thought I understood what family meant. I'm Atticus, 32 years old, and I teach American history at Jefferson High School here in Denver. After my divorce from Sarah became final, I moved back to the house where I grew up, thinking I could rebuild my life where it all began. That Victorian home on Maple Street had been in our family for 3 generations, its wraparound porch and bay windows representing something solid in a world that seemed increasingly unstable. My grandmother Eleanor had lived there for 60 years, tending her rose garden and hosting Sunday dinners that brought the whole neighborhood together. She passed away last winter, and I was the only family member who visited her regularly during those final months. Every Tuesday after school, I'd bring her groceries and listen to her stories about the house's history. She'd tell me about the oak floors my grandfather installed in 1952, or how she painted each room a different color to match the seasons. Jenna, my older sister by 4 years, had always been the golden child. At 36, she worked part-time at a dental office while raising her daughter Madison alone. The father, Tyler, contributed sporadically to child support when his construction jobs paid well. Jenna lived in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment across town, constantly complaining about the thin walls and unreliable heating. Our parents, David and Carol, had retired 3 years ago after decades of public service. Dad worked for the Postal Service while Mom spent her career as a registered nurse. They lived comfortably but modestly on their pensions, always willing to help Jenna financially when Madison needed new clothes or school supplies. The will reading took place 3 weeks after grandmother Eleanor's funeral. Samuel Morrison, the family attorney, gathered us in his oak-paneled office downtown. The leather chairs creaked as we settled in, everyone expecting the standard equal distribution among grandchildren. Eleanor Matthews has left her home on Maple Street to her grandson, Atticus Matthews. Samuel read in his measured tone. She specifically noted his demonstrated responsibility and care for family traditions during her final years. The silence stretched like a held breath before Jenna erupted. "That's impossible," grandmother was confused in her last months. "She promised me that house when Madison was born. I'm the oldest grandchild, and I have a child to think about." My parents immediately sided with her protests. "Atticus doesn't need a 4-bedroom house," Mom said, her voice trembling with indignation. "Jenna has been struggling to make ends meet. This is clearly a mistake." "The will is ironclad," Samuel explained patiently. Eleanor was mentally sharp until her final day. She consulted with me multiple times over the past 2 years to ensure these wishes were properly documented. Dad leaned forward in his chair, his postal worker's pragmatism taking over. "Surely there's something we can do. Family should stick together. Atticus wouldn't want to see his niece living in that tiny apartment when there's a family home available." I felt the weight of their expectations, but something deeper troubled me. "I'll consider all options," I said carefully, "but I need time to process this." Over the next few weeks, family gatherings became tense affairs. Jenna would make pointed comments about how Madison deserved stability and how unfair it was for a bachelor to monopolize family resources. She started bringing potential roommate applications to Sunday dinner, explaining how she could afford the house's upkeep by renting out bedrooms. Then Samuel called with disturbing news that changed everything. "Atticus, I need to discuss something confidential. We've received inquiries from 3 different people claiming Jenna promised them rooms in the house you inherited. They've paid deposits totaling $3,000. My blood chilled as the implications sank in. She's been collecting money for a house she doesn't own. It appears she's been telling people the inheritance was finalized in her favor. These deposits were collected over 2 weeks before the will was even read. We need to address this immediately before it becomes a legal issue. I hung up the phone with a heavy heart, realizing my sister had been planning to defraud both strangers and family members. The grandmother who raised us to value honesty and integrity would have been devastated to see how quickly greed corrupted the family she loved. The Sunday dinner table became a battlefield disguised as family fellowship. Mom would set out her good china and prepare pot roast, but the meal felt more like an intervention than a gathering. Jenna arrived early each week, positioning Madison strategically so her innocent questions would pierce through any resistance I might have. "Uncle Atticus, why can't Mommy and I live in the big house with the flower garden?" Madison asked during one particularly uncomfortable meal, her 3-year-old voice carrying the rehearsed quality of coached innocence. "Sweetheart, your uncle is being selfish." Jenna replied loud enough for everyone to hear. "Some people care more about having space for themselves than helping family." Dad set down his fork with deliberate force. "Atticus, your grandmother would be turning in her grave if she saw how you're treating your sister. That woman believed in family, taking care of family. She also believed in personal responsibility." I responded quietly, thinking about the deposit money Jenna had already collected fraudulently. Carol's eyes filled with tears as she described Madison's innocent questions about why she couldn't have a backyard to play in. "That child asks me every night when she's going to live somewhere with grass and trees. How do you explain to a 3-year-old that her uncle values property more than family?" The emotional manipulation intensified throughout October. Patricia Walsh, a longtime family friend, approached me after church one Sunday with concerning information. "Atticus, I thought you should know what Jenna's been telling people around town. She owes my daughter's daycare $800 and borrowed $1,500 from her coworker last month. She told them both that money troubles would be solved soon because she was inheriting the family home." Patricia's revelation led me to dig deeper into Jenna's financial situation. Through discreet inquiries, I discovered she owed nearly $8,000 across multiple credit cards. Her car payments were 3 months behind, and she'd borrowed against her next 4 paychecks at work. This wasn't just about wanting the house. Jenna was drowning in debt and saw the inheritance as her only lifeline. Recognizing her desperation, I proposed a reasonable compromise during our next family dinner. "Jenna, you and Madison can live in the house rent-free. You'd only need to cover utilities and basic maintenance. This gives you stability without transferring ownership, and I can help you create a budget to get back on solid financial ground." The room fell silent as Jenna's face cycled through surprised consideration and then hardening resolve. "I won't be your charity case, Atticus. I need to build equity for Madison's future. Living there without ownership means I'm just your tenant dependent on your goodwill. But you'd have security and space," I reasoned. "Madison could have that garden she wants, and you'd save enough money to pay down your debts." "You don't understand." Jenna snapped, her composure cracking. "I need assets. I need something in my name that proves I can provide for my daughter. Your offer just makes me a guest in my own family's home." Mom and Dad rallied to support Jenna's position with frustrating predictability. "He's trying to be the lord of the manor," Dad grumbled, making his sister grovel for permission to live in her grandmother's house. "It's condescending and controlling," Mom added. "If Eleanor knew Atticus was using the house to manipulate family relationships, she'd change that will from beyond the grave." Their criticism stung because part of me wondered if they were right. Was I being unreasonable? But then I remembered the fraudulent deposits and realized this wasn't about family harmony. It was about enabling destructive behavior. 2 weeks later, Helen Crawford, my principal at Jefferson High, called me into her office with a troubled expression. "Atticus, I received a concerning call from someone claiming to be your sister. She suggested you've been having emotional difficulties since your grandmother's death and might need professional support." My stomach dropped as Helen continued. She provided specific examples of erratic behavior, claiming you've been missing family obligations and making concerning statements about feeling overwhelmed. She wondered if you're fit to handle the responsibilities of teaching right now. Principal Crawford, I've maintained perfect attendance and my lesson plans are always submitted early. What specific behaviors did she describe? What spanking mangs at chinins? What's chinas? Helen consulted her notes uncomfortably. She mentioned you've been isolating from family, making threats about legal action over minor disagreements, and showing signs of paranoid thinking. She said she's worried about your mental state. The calculated nature of Jenna's attack on my livelihood left me speechless. She wasn't just pressuring me emotionally, she was actively trying to destroy my career and reputation. "I can assure you these claims are completely false," I told Helen. "I'm happy to provide character references or submit to any evaluation you deem necessary." "That won't be needed," Helen replied kindly. "Your work speaks for itself. But I wanted you to know about this call in case there are family issues affecting your personal life." That evening, I sat in my temporary apartment reviewing bank statements and credit reports, trying to understand how deep Jenna's financial deception ran. What I discovered made my hands shake with a mixture of rage and disbelief. Samuel Morrison's urgent phone call the next morning confirmed my worst fears. "Atticus, we have a serious problem. I've received notification from 3 different financial institutions about credit applications filed in your name using the house as collateral." "That's impossible." I stammered, though I already knew it wasn't. "She's been approved for a $30,000 home equity loan and a credit card with a $15,000 limit. The signatures don't match your handwriting, but she had enough personal information to pass their verification processes." As Samuel spoke, I felt the foundation of my relationship with Jenna crumble completely. This wasn't desperation or poor judgment. It was calculated fraud that could have destroyed my credit and financial future. She hadn't just crossed a line. She'd obliterated every boundary that separated family disagreement from criminal behavior. Detective Maria Santos specialized in identity theft cases, and her office walls displayed certificates acknowledging her expertise in financial fraud investigation. She reviewed the evidence I'd gathered with the methodical attention of someone who'd seen every possible variation of family betrayal. "Your sister was thorough," Detective Santos observed, spreading the fraudulent credit applications across her desk. "She used your social security number, employment information, and property details with impressive accuracy. This wasn't an impulsive decision. It required significant planning and preparation." The bank's security footage was damning. Camera angles captured Jenna confidently approaching the loan officer's desk wearing a professional blouse and carrying a briefcase. She handed over a driver's license bearing her photograph, but my name and personal information. Her demeanor showed no nervousness or hesitation as she signed documents that could have bankrupted me. "How did she get a fake ID?" I asked, struggling to reconcile this calculated criminal with the sister who used to braid my hair when I was sad. "That's where things get interesting," Detective Santos replied, pulling out another file. "The ID was professionally made. We've traced it to a document forgery operation run by Tyler Brennan, your sister's ex-boyfriend and Madison's father. Tyler's criminal background painted a disturbing picture. 2 arrests for insurance fraud, 1 conviction for property damage, and multiple restraining orders from previous girlfriends who accused him of financial manipulation. Phone records revealed daily conversations between Tyler and Jenna spanning several months with call durations, suggesting detailed planning sessions. We believe Tyler coached your sister through this entire scheme, Detective Santos continued. His construction background gave him access to property assessment information, and his fraud experience provided the technical knowledge needed to create convincing false documents. When I confronted my parents with this evidence, their response shattered what remained of my faith in family loyalty. Instead of horror at Jenna's criminal behavior, they focused on minimizing her actions and preserving family unity. She was desperate. Mom said, her voice defensive rather than apologetic. People do crazy things when they feel cornered. You could have prevented all this by just being reasonable about the house. Dad's pragmatic approach was even more painful. Look, she made mistakes, but family doesn't send family to prison. You pay off these debts, she learns her lesson, and we move on. That's how families work. How families work, I repeated incredulously. She committed multiple felonies. She could have ruined my credit permanently. What lesson does she learn if there are no consequences? The lesson that family forgives, Carol replied firmly. Prison won't help Madison, and it won't help Jenna become a better mother. Show some compassion for your niece, if you can't find any for your sister. Their enabling response revealed how Jenna had learned to manipulate consequences throughout her life. Every mistake had been cushioned by family members who prioritized peace over accountability, teaching her that tears and desperation could override any boundary. Meanwhile, Jenna's character assassination campaign expanded beyond my workplace into our entire neighborhood. She positioned herself as the struggling single mother being victimized by her heartless brother, telling carefully crafted stories that painted me as controlling and vindictive. Mrs. Johnson, who lived 3 houses down from the family home, stopped me outside the grocery store one afternoon. Atticus, I feel compelled to speak with you about what's been happening. Jenna visited last week with little Madison, explaining how you're forcing them to live in poverty rather than share your grandmother's house. What exactly did she tell you? I asked, dreading the answer. She said you've become obsessed with ownership and control since your divorce, taking out your anger on family members who need help. She showed me Madison's shoes. They had holes in the soles. And explained how you refused to let them live somewhere stable. The calculated manipulation was breathtaking. Jenna had deliberately damaged Madison's shoes to create evidence of poverty, using her own daughter as a prop in her deception campaign. Marcus Thompson, the attorney Jenna had somehow afforded despite her claimed financial struggles, contacted Samuel with a settlement proposal that revealed the true scope of her planning. The offer was stunning in its audacity. I would transfer the house deed to Jenna, and in exchange, she would drop a lawsuit claiming grandmother Eleanor lacked mental capacity when she wrote the will. She's alleging elder abuse, Samuel explained during our emergency meeting. The lawsuit claims you manipulated a vulnerable elderly woman for financial gain, isolating her from family members and pressuring her to change her will in your favor. That's completely backwards, I protested. I was the only one who visited regularly. Jenna barely spoke to grandmother Eleanor in her final years except when she needed money. I know, but she's assembled what looks like compelling evidence. Edited conversations, carefully selected photographs, and testimony from people who claim they witnessed concerning interactions between you and your grandmother. The fabricated lawsuit included allegations that I had controlled Eleanor's finances, monitored her communications, and gradually alienated her from other family members. Medical records were misrepresented to suggest cognitive decline, and financial transactions were reframed as evidence of manipulation rather than legitimate assistance with daily needs. What terrified me most was how convincing the false narrative sounded when presented without context. Someone unfamiliar with our family dynamics might genuinely believe I had taken advantage of a vulnerable elderly woman. Private investigator Janet Brooks, recommended by Samuel for her expertise in domestic fraud cases, uncovered the most chilling evidence yet. Hidden recording devices throughout my parents' house revealed that Jenna had been secretly documenting family conversations for months. She's edited these recordings with professional software. Janet explained, playing back a conversation I didn't remember having. My voice, clearly speaking to different people at different times, had been spliced together to create statements I'd never made. In the fabricated recording, I appeared to threaten Madison's safety and describe elaborate plans to maintain control over family property through intimidation. My actual words about protecting the house's historical value had been combined with separate comments about teaching discipline to create something sinister and threatening. This is sophisticated work, Janet continued. She's planning to use these recordings in family court as evidence that you're dangerous and unfit to inherit property where a child might visit. The realization that Jenna had been recording intimate family moments for months, manipulating my words to create false evidence against me, felt like a violation beyond anything I could have imagined. She hadn't just betrayed my trust, she'd weaponized every moment of vulnerability I'd shared during our family gatherings. As the full scope of Jenna's deception became clear, I faced an impossible choice. I could surrender the house and validate her criminal behavior, or I could fight back and watch my family implode under the weight of legal consequences and public scrutiny. Either path seemed destined to destroy relationships that had taken decades to build. Jenna's next escalation proved she had no intention of accepting any compromise. Using her edited recordings as evidence, she filed for a restraining order, claiming I had threatened both her and Madison's safety during family gatherings. The legal document painted a terrifying picture of an unstable man using property disputes to intimidate a single mother and her innocent child. Judge Williams granted a temporary restraining order based on the fabricated evidence barring me from approaching within 500 feet of Jenna or Madison. More devastating, the order temporarily prohibited me from entering my own property while the court reviewed the allegations. This is a standard precaution, the judge explained during the brief hearing. If these allegations prove unfounded, the order will be lifted. However, child safety takes precedence over property rights. Jenna's performance in court was Oscar-worthy. She spoke softly occasionally, dabbing her eyes with tissues, describing how my obsession with the inheritance had transformed me into someone she no longer recognized. She claimed I had made veiled threats about what would happen to people who crossed family boundaries, implying violence without making specific accusations. Your Honor, my daughter is only 3 years old, Jenna testified, her voice breaking at precisely the right moments. She shouldn't have to live in fear because her uncle can't accept that family means sharing what we have. The restraining order gave Jenna exactly what she'd wanted: legal access to the house while I was barred from the property. She moved in within hours of the court ruling, changing locks and posting no trespassing signs to establish what her lawyer called protective occupancy. Samuel worked frantically to challenge the restraining order, but the legal system moved slowly compared to Jenna's destruction. While bureaucracy ground through its processes, she systematically dismantled everything that made the house valuable. Margaret Chen, the neighbor who shared a fence line with our backyard, called to report disturbing activity. Atticus, I'm sorry to tell you this, but I've seen strangers removing items from your grandmother's house. Yesterday, 3 men loaded antique furniture into a truck. I tried to approach them, but Jenna said she was selling things to cover maintenance costs. Eleanor's antique piano, the one she'd played for neighborhood children every Christmas morning, disappeared, along with handcrafted furniture that had been in our family for generations. Jenna sold these irreplaceable heirlooms to fund her legal defense and covered debts, treating our heritage like a liquidation sale. The utilities bills she accumulated during her illegal occupation were staggering. She cranked the heat to 80 degrees, left lights burning constantly, and allowed Tyler's friends to use the garage for activities that sent neighbors calling the police about loud noises and strange odors at all hours. She's running a chop shop out of your garage, Detective Rodriguez explained when he called about the noise complaints. We can't prove anything concrete yet, but stolen motorcycle parts are being processed somewhere in your neighborhood, and the activity centers around your property. Jenna had also begun what she called necessary renovations that were actually strategic vandalism designed to decrease the home's value. She removed original hardwood floors, claiming they were damaged, and replaced beautiful crown molding with cheap alternatives from home improvement stores. If she can't have the house in perfect condition, she's going to make sure nobody else can either, Janet Brooks observed after reviewing photographs of the property damage. The most heartbreaking betrayal came when I learned about Jenna's theft from our parents. Dad called me 3 weeks after the restraining order was issued, his voice heavy with shame and confusion. Atticus, I need to tell you something that's been eating at me. Your mother and I have been missing money from our savings account. $2,000 that we'd set aside for our anniversary cruise next spring. How much is missing total? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. $2,000 this month, $1,500 last month, and smaller amounts going back to summer. We thought we were forgetting deposits or miscounting withdrawals, but the bank showed us the transaction records. Someone with access to our account information has been making systematic withdrawals. The pattern matched Jenna's legal expenses and Madison's sudden influx of new clothes and toys. She'd been stealing from our retired parents to fund her war against me, taking money they'd saved from modest pensions to pay for lawyers and private investigators working to destroy my reputation. Dad, why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked gently. Because we hoped we were wrong, he admitted, and because your mother didn't want to believe Jenna would steal from her own parents. We kept thinking there had to be another explanation. When confronted with bank records proving her theft, Jenna's response revealed the depth of her entitlement. She claimed our parents owed her financial support for raising their only grandchild, and that taking money from their savings was simply collecting what Madison deserved. They spend money on your legal defense, she told them angrily. Why shouldn't they contribute to mine? I'm fighting for their granddaughter's future home. Carol's faith in her daughter finally began cracking under the weight of evidence. I never raised you to steal from family, Jenna. That money represented months of careful budgeting and sacrifice. Everything I've done has been for Madison, Jenna replied without remorse. When she's living in security instead of some cramped apartment, you'll understand why these sacrifices were necessary. Samuel finally succeeded in getting the restraining order dismissed after proving the recordings had been manipulated. Audio forensic analysis revealed multiple splice points where conversations had been edited together, and voice pattern analysis confirmed the fabricated statements didn't match my natural speaking rhythms. The court apologizes for the error, Judge Williams said during the dismissal hearing. However, Ms. Matthews, you have 48 hours to vacate the property before law enforcement will assist in your removal. I approached the house on a gray November morning, accompanied by a locksmith and sheriff's deputy Karen Walsh. Nothing could have prepared me for what awaited inside. Jenna hadn't just damaged property, she desecrated memories. Family photographs had been torn from their frames and scattered across the floor. Eleanor's rose garden was dead from neglect, the carefully tended beds turned into muddy patches where Tyler's friends had parked motorcycles. The walls bore holes where fixtures had been removed, and water damage from burst pipes suggested sabotage rather than accident. This is criminal vandalism, Deputy Walsh observed, photographing the destruction for her report. She didn't just live here, she systematically destroyed anything of value. In Eleanor's bedroom, I found the most personal violation. My grandmother's diary, which I'd planned to preserve as family history, had pages torn out and burned in the fireplace. Only fragments remained enough to see her handwriting praising my visits and expressing concern about Jenna's rare appearances and constant financial requests. Standing amid the destruction, I made a decision that would define my character for the rest of my life. Despite everything Jenna had done, I offered her one final opportunity for redemption. Through Samuel, I sent a message proposing a last-chance settlement. She had 24 hours to move out peacefully, return all stolen property she could recover, and begin counseling for her destructive behavior patterns. In exchange, I would limit criminal charges to restitution and probation, rather than pursuing the maximum prison sentence her crimes deserved. Tell her this is about more than property, I instructed Samuel. This is about whether she wants Madison to grow up visiting her mother in prison or learning healthier ways to handle disappointment. Instead of accepting the olive branch, Jenna's response was swift and decisive. Security cameras I'd managed to reinstall before the restraining order captured her final act of revenge. At 2 a.m, she returned to the house with Tyler and several gas cans. The footage showed methodical preparation as she soaked the front porch living room furniture and Eleanor's remaining personal effects with accelerant. Tyler's cigarette lighter provided ignition for multiple fire points designed to ensure complete destruction. As flames began consuming the first floor, Jenna stood in the yard watching her handiwork with satisfied expression. She believed insurance money would force me to rebuild somewhere else, leaving the property available for her to claim through adverse possession laws Tyler had researched. What she didn't realize was that arson invalidated insurance coverage and constituted first-degree felony charges. Her attempt to destroy what she couldn't possess had finally crossed the line from family dysfunction into serious criminal behavior that even our parents couldn't rationalize or minimize. The house fire would burn more than wood and memories. It would finally illuminate the true nature of Jenna's character and force everyone who'd enabled her behavior to confront the monster their protection had created. I woke to my phone ringing at 2:43 in the morning, dragging me from restless sleep in the furnished apartment I'd rented across town. Mrs. Rodriguez's panicked voice cut through my grogginess like a blade. "Atticus, the house is on fire. The whole front is in flames, and the fire department is on their way." I threw on clothes and raced through empty streets toward Maple Street, my heart pounding, as orange light grew brighter against the November sky. Fire trucks blocked the road 3 blocks from the house, their sirens mixing with the crackling sounds of destruction that had haunted my nightmares for weeks. Smoke billowed into the night sky while firefighters battled flames that had already consumed the wraparound porch and broken through the living room windows. The Victorian home where 3 generations of my family had celebrated Christmas mornings was being devoured by fire that danced like demons against the darkness. Neighbors gathered in worried clusters, their faces illuminated by the hellish glow. I pushed through the crowd searching for answers, dreading what I might discover about how this tragedy had started. Then I saw her. Jenna stood prominently among the spectators, Madison crying in her arms, while she spoke animatedly to arriving police officers. Her performance was flawless. The concerned neighbor reporting a suspected electrical fire while comforting her frightened daughter. "Officer, I was driving by after working a late shift when I saw smoke," she explained to Lieutenant Thompson with practiced sincerity. "This is my family's home, and I was terrified someone might be inside. The electrical system in these old houses can be so dangerous." I pulled out my phone and began recording her testimony, watching her weave a narrative of innocent discovery rather than deliberate destruction. She didn't notice me filming as she described her fear for Madison's safety and concern for the neighborhood's historic properties. Detective Rodriguez arrived 20 minutes later as fire crews continued battling the blaze. I approached him immediately, my phone ready with evidence that would shatter Jenna's carefully constructed alibi. "Detective, I have security footage you need to see immediately." The video was crystal clear, despite the early morning darkness. Motion-activated cameras captured Jenna's methodical preparation as she removed gas cans from Tyler's truck and systematically poured accelerant around the porch foundations and through broken windows. "Jesus," Detective Rodriguez muttered as he watched her ignite multiple fire points. "She's not even trying to hide what she's doing. Look at that body language. This isn't desperation, it's calculated destruction." The footage continued rolling as flames took hold, showing Jenna and Tyler standing safely back while fire consumed the first floor. Madison slept in the truck throughout the arson, unaware her mother was committing felonies that would determine her future. "How long between the fire starting and her calling it in as an electrical accident?" Detective Rodriguez asked. "About 20 minutes, I replied. long enough to move the truck, hide the gas cans, and position herself as a concerned passerby. When police arrested Jenna 40 minutes later, her shock at being caught was almost comical. She'd been so confident in her performance, so certain the security cameras had been destroyed in earlier vandalism, that she never considered the possibility of being recorded committing arson. "This is ridiculous," she protested as handcuffs clicked around her wrists. "I reported the fire. Why would I burn down my own family's house?" "Because you don't own it," Detective Rodriguez replied grimly. "And because you figured insurance money was better than watching your brother rebuild what you couldn't possess." The most devastating moment wasn't watching Jenna's arrest. It was my parents' reaction. Instead of horror at her crime or concern for my loss, their immediate focus was protecting her from consequences and minimizing the destruction she'd caused. "There has to be some mistake," Mom insisted as paramedics checked Madison for smoke inhalation. "Jenna wouldn't hurt anyone. She's not capable of something this extreme." Dad's response was even more painful. "Atticus, you can't seriously be planning to press charges. She's clearly having some kind of breakdown from stress. What Madison needs now is professional help for her mother, not more trauma from legal proceedings." "What about what I need?" I asked incredulously. "She burned down our grandmother's house. She destroyed 3 generations of family history out of spite." "The house was just wood and bricks," Carol replied dismissively. "Jenna is family. Madison needs her mother, not another reason to feel abandoned." Fire investigator Thomas Anderson arrived at dawn to examine the scene. His preliminary assessment confirmed what the security footage had already proven: multiple ignition points, accelerant distribution patterns, and burn characteristics consistent with deliberate arson. "This wasn't someone trying to cover up another crime," Investigator Anderson explained to the assembled officials. "This was pure destruction for its own sake. She wanted to watch it burn." The insurance company placed an immediate hold on any claims pending completion of the criminal investigation. Even if Jenna was convicted, the policy might not cover losses from arson committed by family members with access to the property. Neighbors who'd been swayed by Jenna's manipulation campaign began approaching me with apologies and additional information. Mrs. Patterson revealed that Jenna had tried recruiting her to lie about my character, offering to pay for false testimony about threatening behavior I'd never displayed. She wanted me to say I'd witnessed you screaming at Madison during family visits, Mrs. Patterson admitted shamefully. When I refused, she suggested I didn't understand how serious the situation was and that a child's safety was at stake. Mr. Chen described watching Jenna throw rocks at windows during her illegal occupation, claiming she was testing security after alleged break-in attempts. Her vandalism had been systematically planned to support her narrative of needing protection from my supposed instability. As dawn broke over the smoldering ruins, investigators made a discovery that changed everything about how we understood Jenna's intentions. In the basement, which had been partially protected by concrete construction, they found evidence of extended illegal habitation. "She's been living here for weeks without your knowledge," Investigator Anderson reported. "There's a makeshift apartment set up with stolen utilities, hidden access points, and enough supplies for long-term occupation." The basement revealed the depth of Jenna's deception. She'd been secretly living in the house while maintaining her apartment lease and telling everyone she was desperately searching for housing solutions. Electric space heaters were connected to illegally tapped power lines, and a hidden water connection provided basic utilities. More disturbing were the research materials scattered throughout her underground living space. Internet printouts about carbon monoxide poisoning symptoms, house fire victim identification procedures, and inheritance laws regarding property transfer after suspicious deaths. "Detective Rodriguez," I said quietly as the implications sank in, "I think she was planning more than just burning down the house." Computer forensics would later reveal browser history, showing extensive research into making deaths appear accidental, obtaining life insurance benefits after family member deaths, and legal procedures for claiming property after suspicious deaths. Her plan wasn't just destroying property, it was eliminating obstacles to inheritance through methods that would appear accidental. The security footage had captured more than arson. It had prevented what might have been murder disguised as tragedy, revealing the true depth of Jenna's transformation from demanding sister into calculating predator, willing to destroy anyone who stood between her and what she believed she deserved. Standing in front of the charred remains of Eleanor's rose garden, I realized the fire had burned away more than wood and memories. It had finally revealed who Jenna really was beneath the mask of desperate motherhood and family victimization, showing everyone that actions truly do have price tags that must eventually be paid. District Attorney Rebecca Stone reviewed the evidence. With the clinical detachment of someone who'd prosecuted every possible variation of family violence and financial crime. The charges she filed against Jenna were comprehensive first-degree arson, insurance fraud, identity, theft, burglary, conspiracy, and attempted murder based on the basement research materials. This isn't typical sibling rivalry gone wrong, DA Stone explained during our preparatory meeting. The evidence suggests long-term planning for multiple felonies, including potential homicide. Your sister represents a genuine threat to public safety. Tyler faced separate charges for providing materials and technical expertise for the arson, plus his role in the identity theft scheme. His construction background and criminal history made him an essential co-conspirator rather than just a peripheral figure. Brennan coached her through every step, Detective Santos explained. Phone records show daily conversations spanning months, and his fingerprints are on the gas cans used in the arson. He's looking at 4 years minimum. My parents' response to the criminal charges was predictably devastating. Instead of supporting justice for their grandchildren's sake, they hired expensive attorney William Chase, using their entire retirement savings, and launched a pressure campaign designed to force me into dropping charges. The family interventions became increasingly desperate and manipulative. They arranged for Madison to call me during supervised visitation coaching, her to ask why I wanted to send Mommy away forever, and whether I would take care of her if Mommy couldn't come home. Uncle Atticus, Madison's 3-year-old voice trembled over the phone. Grandma says you're angry at Mommy, and that's why she can't live with us anymore. Did I do something bad? These conversations were orchestrated psychological warfare designed to exploit my love for Madison while protecting Jenna from consequences. The calls were recorded by Child Protective Services as evidence of continued family dysfunction and inappropriate use of a child to influence legal proceedings. Carol scheduled increasingly elaborate guilt sessions disguised as family meetings. She'd prepare Madison's favorite meals and invite me to dinner, then spend the evening describing how the little girl cried herself to sleep asking for her mommy. That child doesn't understand why her uncle values property more than family, Mom would say while Madison played innocently nearby. She keeps asking when the mean people will let her mommy come home. Dad's approach was more direct but equally manipulative. Look, son, I know Jenna made serious mistakes, but prison won't undo the damage to the house, and it will destroy Madison's childhood. Sometimes being the bigger person means accepting losses for the greater good. What about accountability? I asked during one particularly tense conversation. What lesson does Madison learn if we teach her that desperate circumstances excuse criminal behavior? She learns that family forgives, David replied firmly. She learns that love is more important than punishment. Right now, she's learning that her uncle chose revenge over mercy when her mother needed help most. Local media picked up the story as a cautionary tale about inheritance disputes and family dysfunction. Channel 7's investigative reporter Janet Martinez interviewed neighbors and court officials, creating a narrative that initially favored Jenna's portrayal of herself as a desperate mother driven to extremes. Sources close to the family describe a bitter inheritance dispute that escalated into violence, Martinez reported during the evening news. A single mother's fight for housing stability allegedly led to property destruction and arson charges that could result in decades behind bars. The public sympathy shifted dramatically when security footage was released showing Jenna's methodical preparation and Tyler's active participation. Viewers watched her pour accelerant with calm precision, ignite multiple fire points, and then position herself as a concerned neighbor, reporting an electrical accident. This isn't desperation, one viewer commented on the news station's website. This is calculated destruction by someone who figured insurance money was better than watching someone else enjoy what she couldn't have. The prosecution offered Jenna a plea bargain that would have resulted in 3 years prison time in exchange for full restitution and mandatory counseling. William Chase recommended accepting the deal, explaining that trial could result in much harsher sentencing if the attempted murder charges were proven. Jenna rejected the plea offer with stunning arrogance. She remained convinced that her lawyer could paint me as the real villain who'd driven her to desperation through systematic emotional abuse and property manipulation. "We're going to trial," she announced to our parents during a jail visit. "When the jury hears how Atticus psychologically tortured me in Madison, they'll understand why I had to take drastic action to protect my daughter's future." Her defense strategy relied on portraying the arson as a mental health crisis triggered by my cruel rejection of reasonable family requests. Chase planned to argue that years of emotional manipulation and threats had caused a psychological breakdown that made Jenna temporarily incapable of rational decision-making. The trial began on a cold February morning with jury selection that revealed how divided public opinion had become. Some potential jurors expressed sympathy for single mothers facing housing instability, while others focused on the criminal nature of arson and identity theft. Character witnesses painted starkly different pictures of both Jenna and me. Former students testified about my dedication and kindness, describing how I'd helped struggling families and volunteered for community service projects. Principal Crawford publicly apologized for initially believing Jenna's false reports about my mental state. "Mr. Matthews represents everything we hope for in education," one parent testified. "He's patient with children who have behavioral challenges, stays after school to provide extra help, and treats every student with dignity regardless of their family situation." Eleanor's former neighbors described my years of faithful visits, while Jenna rarely appeared except when needing money. Bank employees detailed the brazenness of her identity theft, showing security footage of her confidently signing fraudulent documents without any sign of mental distress. "She knew exactly what she was doing," testified loan officer Patricia Wells. "Her demeanor was calm and professional. She answered all verification questions correctly and showed no nervousness about the process." Jenna's defense witnesses painted a very different picture. Carefully selected friends described her struggles as a single mother and her family's lack of support during financial difficulties. They portrayed me as controlling and vindictive someone who used property ownership to manipulate family relationships. "Atticus always looked down on Jenna," testified her co-worker Amanda Foster. "He acted like he was better than everyone else because he had a college degree and steady income." Jenna told me he enjoyed watching her struggle because it made him feel superior. The defense's case crumbled during cross-examination when it became clear these witnesses were repeating Jenna's own narratives rather than independently observed behavior. None of them could provide specific examples of my alleged controlling behavior, and several admitted they'd never witnessed our family interactions personally. Chase's strategy of portraying the arson as mental health crisis was undermined by the basement evidence, showing months of planning and research. The prosecution demonstrated that someone experiencing psychological breakdown doesn't methodically research murder techniques and establish secret living arrangements while maintaining normal workplace behavior. The turning point came when Jenna took the witness stand to testify in her own defense. Chase had coached her to express remorse and acknowledge poor judgment while maintaining that desperation had driven her to uncharacteristic behavior. "I never meant for things to go so far," she testified, with practiced sincerity. "I was terrified about Madison's future and felt completely alone. When my brother refused every reasonable compromise, I felt like I was drowning with no one to help pull me out." DA Stone's cross-examination systematically dismantled Jenna's performance. She presented evidence of the fraudulent rental deposits, the stolen money from our parents, and the months of planning revealed by the basement setup. "Ms. Matthews, you collected $3,000 in false rental deposits before your grandmother's will was even read correct." "That was a misunderstanding," Jenna replied defensively. "I assumed the inheritance would be handled fairly." "You assumed you could commit fraud based on property you never owned, and when your brother offered you rent-free housing, you rejected that compromise because you wanted full ownership, correct?" "I needed security for my daughter's future." "Security you intended to obtain through identity theft, property destruction, and potentially homicide based on your research materials." The prosecution's systematic presentation of evidence left no room for reasonable doubt about premeditation and intent. Jenna's crimes weren't desperate mistakes. They were calculated attacks designed to eliminate obstacles to what she believed she deserved. Chase's final argument attempted to generate sympathy by focusing on Madison's potential suffering if her mother received maximum sentencing. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'm not asking you to excuse my client's behavior. I'm asking you to consider that harsh punishment will primarily hurt an innocent child who has already lost stability and security. DA Stone's closing argument focused on accountability and public safety. The defendant researched methods for murdering her brother and making it appear accidental. She burned down property worth $200,000 out of spite. If we don't hold her accountable for these calculated crimes, what message does that send to other people who think desperation justifies violence? The moment that sealed Jenna's fate came during DA Stone's final questions. When confronted with undeniable evidence of her planning and premeditation, Jenna's carefully maintained facade finally cracked. "Your brother offered you housing, you rejected it. He offered to help with your debts, you chose fraud instead. At what point did you decide that burning down his home was preferable to accepting his assistance? He never offered real help." Jenna exploded, her voice rising to a shout that echoed through the courtroom. "Everything came with strings-attached conditions that made me grovel for what should have been mine by right. He deserved to lose everything for treating family like charity cases." The outburst continued as bailiffs approached. "I should have burned it down with him inside. Maybe then Madison would have inherited from both sides, instead of being stuck with an uncle who cares more about property than family." Her words were recorded by court cameras and broadcast on evening news programs across Colorado. The calculated nature of her rage, the casual reference to murdering me, and her complete lack of remorse for endangering her own daughter destroyed any lingering sympathy jurors might have felt. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges. Jenna's expression as the foreman read each conviction showed genuine surprise that her performance hadn't generated the acquittal she'd expected. As court officers prepared to escort her back to jail pending sentencing, she turned toward the gallery where our parents sat with Madison and delivered her final act of manipulation. "Madison, Mommy loves you more than anything. Uncle Atticus is sending me away because he's angry, but that doesn't mean you did anything wrong. Be good for Grandma and Grandpa, and remember that everything Mommy did was to give you a better life." Even facing years in prison, she couldn't resist using her daughter's innocence as a weapon designed to inflict maximum emotional damage on everyone who'd refused to enable her destructive choices. Judge Patricia Williams had presided over family court for 15 years before moving to criminal division, giving her unique perspective on cases where domestic dysfunction escalated into serious criminal behavior. She scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks after the verdict, allowing time for victim impact statements and character assessments. I spent those 2 weeks reflecting on what justice should look like for someone whose crimes were rooted in family relationships and parental responsibilities. Part of me wanted maximum sentencing as validation for everything I'd endured, but another part recognized that harsh punishment would primarily impact Madison's future. The sentencing hearing brought our entire family together in the same courtroom for the first time since the trial began. Madison sat between our parents in the gallery, too young to understand the proceedings, but old enough to sense the tension and finality in the air. D.A. Stone presented her sentencing recommendation based on the severity of Jenna's crimes and their impact on multiple victims. Your Honor, the defendant's actions endangered public safety, destroyed irreplaceable property, and demonstrated complete disregard for family relationships and legal boundaries. The research materials suggesting planned homicide combined with identity theft, causing significant financial damage, indicate someone who poses ongoing threat to community safety. We recommend 8 years in state prison with mandatory restitution and counseling. William Chase made a final plea for reduced sentencing focused entirely on Madison's welfare. Your Honor, I'm not here to minimize my client's actions or deny their serious nature. However, harsh punishment will primarily impact an innocent child who has already experienced significant trauma. Ms. Matthews accepts full responsibility for her choices and their consequences. She's prepared to make financial restitution and participate in any counseling programs the court deems appropriate. But Madison needs her mother's presence more than the state needs her extended incarceration. Judge Williams addressed Jenna directly before announcing her decision. Ms. Matthews, you have been convicted of serious felonies that endangered lives and destroyed property. Your actions showed extensive planning and complete disregard for legal and family boundaries. However, the court must also consider your role as a mother and the impact of sentencing on your daughter's welfare. These competing interests require balanced justice that protects society while recognizing family relationships. I sentence you to 8 years in state prison with possibility of parole after 5 years, contingent on restitution payments and successful completion of anger management and financial responsibility counseling. The restitution order was comprehensive: $60,000 for property damage and rebuilding costs, $30,000 for fraudulent debts, and credit repair, $15,000 for legal expenses, and $25,000 in punitive damages. Total financial responsibility of $130,000, with wage garnishment continuing for decades after release. Additionally, Judge Williams continued, you are permanently prohibited from claiming any interest in the property at issue and barred from unsupervised contact with the victim. Any future communication regarding family matters must be supervised by court-appointed mediators. Jenna's reaction to the sentencing revealed that even facing years in prison, she still believed herself to be the victim of circumstances rather than the architect of consequences. Your Honor, I hope someday my family understands that everything I did was motivated by love for my daughter and desperation about her future. I made serious mistakes, but I never intended to hurt anyone except myself. My brother has his house and his reputation, but my daughter will grow up without her mother because no one could find compassion for a struggling single parent. Tyler received 4 years as an accomplice, his construction background and criminal history, eliminating any possibility of the lenient treatment sometimes offered to first-time offenders. His parole conditions included complete prohibition on contact with our family and mandatory vocational training in fields unrelated to property or construction. The impact on our parents was profound and necessary. Watching their daughter sentenced to prison for crimes they'd minimized and excused forced them to confront how their enabling had contributed to Jenna's escalation from entitled demands to criminal behavior. We thought we were protecting her. Dad admitted during our first family dinner after sentencing. Every time she faced consequences for poor choices, we stepped in to cushion the impact. We taught her that tears and desperation could override any boundary. Mom's transformation was even more dramatic. I kept thinking about what your grandmother would say if she knew we'd used Madison to manipulate you into dropping charges. Eleanor taught us that love sometimes means letting people learn from their mistakes. Their acknowledgement of enabling behavior marked the beginning of genuine family healing. We started attending counseling sessions together, learning to distinguish between helping family members and protecting them from accountability. Madison's transition to living with our parents provided the stability she'd never experienced with Jenna's chaotic lifestyle. Away from constant financial stress and emotional manipulation, she began displaying the playful curiosity natural to 3-year-olds. She's sleeping through the night for the first time in months, Carol reported with wonder. No more nightmares about losing her home or listening to Mommy cry about money problems. I maintained an appropriate uncle relationship with Madison, visiting regularly, but allowing our parents to provide primary care and discipline. She needed consistency and security more than another adult trying to replace her missing mother. The house rebuilding process became unexpectedly therapeutic. Insurance covered most costs, despite the arson, and I hired local contractors who understood the historical significance of Victorian architecture. Neighbors volunteered for restoration projects, creating community bonds stronger than anything we'd shared before. "We should have supported you from the beginning," admitted Mrs. Patterson, while helping replant Eleanor's rose garden. "Jenna's story sounded convincing, but we should have known you better than to believe those accusations." My professional life also benefited from the trial's resolution. Jefferson High's administration publicly acknowledged how they'd been manipulated by Jenna's false reports, and my colleagues expressed admiration for how I'd maintained teaching excellence despite personal trauma. Principal Crawford recommended me for the district's Teacher of the Year award, citing resilience and character demonstrated through extraordinary circumstances. "You showed our students that integrity matters even when it costs everything else," she said during the award ceremony. "I used my experience to help other adults dealing with sibling manipulation and family dysfunction." The support group we started at Community Center drew dozens of people who'd been victimized by relatives using emotional manipulation and financial abuse to override boundaries. The hardest part is accepting that family members can be predators, shared Jennifer, whose sister had stolen her identity and accumulated $40,000 in fraudulent debt. "We're taught that family always comes first, but sometimes family members use that loyalty as a weapon." Professional speaking opportunities allowed me to address inheritance disputes, elder abuse prevention, and family accountability issues. Law enforcement agencies invited me to training sessions about recognizing domestic financial abuse and understanding how family loyalty can be weaponized by manipulative relatives. The restored Victorian home became a gathering place for positive family activities and community events. Eleanor's spirit lived on through holiday celebrations that honored her legacy of bringing people together through kindness rather than obligation. Madison's 4th birthday party, held in the restored Rose Garden, represented everything healing about our family's transformation. She played happily with neighborhood children, while our parents provided loving supervision, free from the chaos that had defined her early years. "Uncle Atticus," she asked while blowing out birthday candles, "when will Mommy come to visit me?" "When she's learned how to make better choices," I replied honestly. "But until then, you have Grandma and Grandpa and me to make sure you're safe and loved." Her innocent question reminded me that Jenna's actions would impact Madison throughout her childhood and beyond. The little girl deserved honesty appropriate to her age level, combined with security that would allow healthy development despite her mother's absence. 5 years later, when Jenna became eligible for parole, she'd completed anger management and financial responsibility courses, but showed little genuine change in perspective. Her letters from prison continued portraying herself as a victim of circumstances rather than accepting accountability for choices that destroyed multiple lives. The parole board denied her first application after reviewing evidence that she'd used prison phone calls to pressure our parents for money and attempt manipulating other inmates into providing false character references. True transformation requires genuine remorse, not just completion of mandatory programs. Madison, now 8 years old, had grown into a confident and thoughtful child who understood age-appropriate explanations about her mother's choices and consequences. She knew Mommy had made serious mistakes that hurt people and needed to learn better ways of solving problems before returning to family life. The rebuilt house stood as testimony to resilience and renewal. Every room held new memories created through healthy family relationships, community involvement, and personal growth. Eleanor's legacy continued through gatherings that celebrated connection without manipulation. Standing in the kitchen where 3 generations of my family had shared meals, I reflected on lessons learned through the most painful experience of my life. Jenna's destructive choices had taught me that true family loyalty means holding each other accountable to higher standards, not enabling destructive behavior through misguided protection. The support group continued meeting monthly, helping dozens of families navigate inheritance disputes, sibling abuse, and financial manipulation. Members learned to distinguish between helping family members and protecting them from consequences, creating healthier relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. Professional recognition for my advocacy work included appointment to the state committee addressing elder abuse prevention and family financial fraud. Legislators valued perspectives gained through personal experience combined with educational expertise about adolescent development and family dynamics. Most importantly, Madison's healthy development proved that cycles of dysfunction can be broken when adults prioritize child welfare over family loyalty. She was learning about boundaries, consequences, and healthy relationships through consistent modeling from adults who'd grown beyond enabling patterns. The life lesson that emerged from our family's crisis was profound and lasting. Actions truly do have price tags that must eventually be paid. Enabling destructive behavior by protecting people from consequences teaches them that manipulation can override any boundary-creating patterns that escalate until legal intervention becomes necessary. True compassion sometimes requires allowing people to face the full weight of their choices. Jenna's criminal behavior wasn't caused by my refusal to surrender the house. It was revealed by circumstances that exposed character traits she'd hidden through years of successful manipulation. Family relationships built on mutual respect and accountability create security that enables everyone to thrive. When we protect family members from natural consequences of poor choices, we rob them of opportunities for genuine growth while teaching destructive patterns to the next generation. Madison's future was brighter because adults in her life had finally learned to distinguish between love and enabling. She was growing up understanding that love includes boundaries, that security comes from consistency rather than manipulation, and that family members who truly care about each other hold each other accountable to be their best selves. My grandmother Eleanor would have been proud to see how her house became a place of healing and growth after surviving destruction. Her legacy lived on not through preserved artifacts, but through lessons about integrity, accountability, and the kind of family loyalty that builds character rather than destroying it. The fire that was meant to destroy everything I valued had instead burned away illusions and revealed truths that set us all free to build healthier relationships. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give family members is refusing to participate in their destructive patterns even when that refusal comes at significant personal cost. Standing in the restored rose garden on Madison's 8th birthday watching her play with friends, while our parents provided loving supervision, I understood that justice isn't just about legal consequences. True justice creates opportunities for everyone to grow beyond the roles that dysfunction assigns them. The closure I'd gained wasn't from watching Jenna face prison time. It was from witnessing our family finally learn that actions have price tags, consequences, create accountability, and real love sometimes requires the courage to let people experience the results of their choices. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right, even when that choice meant watching someone you love face serious consequences for their actions? How do we balance compassion with accountability when family members make destructive choices that hurt everyone around them? Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of the most challenging experiences of my life. If this story resonated with you or helped you think differently about family relationships and boundaries, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might benefit from hearing it, and subscribe for more stories about overcoming family challenges and finding strength through difficult times. Your support helps me continue sharing experiences that remind us all that we're not alone in facing life's toughest decisions. I hope this story encourages you to trust your instincts about healthy boundaries and remember that true family love includes holding each other accountable to be better people. Take care of yourselves and the people who truly matter in your lives.